So we're starting to strip off all the old intake and fuel system, naturally aspirated. We're going to bump that up to something a little, well, a lot.
We're going to
add bigger.
A Whipple Supercharger, which is fun. Now, this is a 12-hour kit. It's a bolt-on. Really easy instructions, shows you how to do it, and we're going to run through. But at first, we need to kind of show you the parts that we took off. We're about halfway done at this point.
Yeah.
So let's look over here on the bench. Here's your stock plenum with your stock rails. We've got some of the hoses out of the way. Pulled your plugs, miscellaneous vacuum hoses. Don't pay attention to that. Pulley, idler pulley. And I think at this point, let's show you the goodies.
That's right.
The good stuff.
Now let's compare to what we took off. Now this is the naturally aspirated intake manifold. Throttle body sitting right here. Now, the only way to drive air into the engine is by atmosphere. We're under pressure. We don't always think about it, but there's pressure there. When I create sort of a vacuum in the piston, push, it's being pushed in. But all I got is 14.7 psi, give or take. And going through this throttle body, I'm trying to enhance that with maybe some tuners by runner lengths, trying to get as much of that as I can. Well, the best way to get beyond naturally aspirated,
cheat.
That's right.
Push air.
Yep, we're going to push it, and we're going to push it pretty hard.
The Whipple Supercharger, it's a screw type, not to be confused with the old school Roots.
That's right. Now Roots, usually a 2 or 3 lobe, maybe even a twist on a 4 lobe. They look similar, but they operate quite differently. So the Roots is actually going to turn the rotors and trap air on the outside next to the case. So it's going to trap air on the outside of the case, but when the rotors come back together, when they mesh, it's going to squeeze the air out and down into the intake manifold.
It's okay, but we can do it much better now.
Yeah, much more efficiently.
Right. And if you look inside, take that light, stick it in there, you can see now with the screw type, we're pulling the air through the front. And we're actually pushing it inside of each one of those lobes until we force it out the bottom.
Yeah, now what happens is on the Roots style, it doesn't build pressure in the case. It's just moving air, kind of like a fan is moving air, and it starts to build pressure below in the intake manifold. And you got pulsations, because as each sort of lobe comes around, I've got some air from this side pushing down, I got some lobe from this side pushing down. I get a lot of up and down, I get a lot of pulsations, I get a lot of wasted energy. That wasted energy is going to come in the form of heat and the power it takes to drive it.
And any time making any kind of power is all about efficiency and also gives you fuel mileage as well.
That's right.
Now, one of the other things you want to try to do is try to cool your charge. So anytime you can cool the air that's coming through into the engine, you can get a more dense package, a more dense charge. You can bump up the timing, you can bump up the power, and really help yourself. And the way they do it here is there's a couple of fittings in the back. There's a pump that you add. It's a little electric pump, runs it through some hoses, and you've got an intercooler. So as the air is forced through, just like a radiator in your car, it's going to cool that air before it goes down into the engine.
That's right. Now, you're trying to be as efficient as possible. That's what the twin screw's doing. You're trying to cool that charge because you're going to heat it no matter what, but the efficiency is going to let you heat it less. Now, what do you do when you're cruising? I'm building pressure within my case. I need a place to bypass. Now, what's nice about the Whipple is they've got a bypass valve here, and you can see it. And what happens is as I build any pressure down into my intercooler and my plenum, I can bypass at cruise modes and let it circulate around. But what's nice about the Whipple style is it bypasses as it goes through the cooler, so I'm cooling that. I'm not pressurizing it and pressurizing it and pressurizing, by not using it at cruise. I'm cooling it. So my whole unit stays cool while I'm cruising, and when I'm ready to hit wide open throttle, that pressure's there, that volume of air is there, I'm ready to go big. All right, last of the clicky clickies. I got the intake bolted down to the bottom half of it.
It's nice that rail comes already assembled, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're going to catch you up to speed because we got a little bit ahead of you. Now, we've kind of taken this in sort of 2 halves right now. Brian's taking apart a lot of the Fiat because, we're adding another pulley, so a lot of routing's going to change. So he's taking care of that side, and I've pulled a lot of that fuel system, a lot of the intake manifold, the throttle body out of the way so we can start to put the new stuff on.
First thing I want to show you is down here in the main pulley, the harmonic balancer. When you're adding this blower, you got to drive it off the crank. So there's a lot more pressure that's coming off of that harmonic balancer, that pulley. And it's not designed for it. So what the kit comes with is a way to dowel pin it, and that's going to keep it from slipping. And it's real easy to do. You just go in, they supply you with a drill bit that goes in. It's got a collar, so you don't drill too far. They're going to supply you with a 14 mil Allen. You're not going to find those around the corner at the hardware store anyway.
Wrench on there in a tight space.
And then they go ahead and supply you, get rid of the stock bolt. They put in a nice high quality ARP. That way it's solid and it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, the stock one is all about friction, but now we got a mechanical lock. So once we get the blower on, we can put the tensioner, back in the right spot. We can loop our belt. Now, I've got the lower base of our plenum. The intercooler is going to sit right in here, and obviously the blower on top. Now, it's great. This comes already pre-assembled with the billet rails. You've already got your crossover on, but I've disconnected it actually because it'll help, install this bypass area here. So I think I'm about ready to pull the tape, and we can do a final install. Check that out. Those are the ports going down into the cylinders, and the tape's just going to keep us, while we're messing around, from dropping a screw.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Anything like that. Same goes for the exhaust side. So let me see if I can get that blower heaved over here.
I've got the heat exchanger. As we talked about earlier, in the intercooler that's underneath the blower, you're taking the heat out, trying to cool the charge of the air that's going into the motor. Now, there's a fitting that's going to come around. These hoses are supplied, and it's going to go around to a pump that's down the front. And once you put this heat exchanger in, it's got a lot of room in between this and the condenser, which is nice because it's going to keep it good and cool. So it goes through the electric pump, comes out, it's going to circulate. This is your tank where you keep an eye on your water fill, and it's going to circle around the back. And as Byrd brings in the actual blower.
All right, I might need some extra hands on this guy here. So we're going to set this just right on the leading edge for now. And it's easier to go ahead and set it here, get these two lines hooked up to my intercooler, which again is underneath the base. Once these guys are on and tight, then we can slide it up onto that cowl, drop it on, and start cinching some of these bolts up. And we are ready to drive about 170 more horsepower into this engine.
That's amazing. It looks cool, and there's a lot left in this blower. Even at 200 horse, 150, 200 horse, I mean, there's still a lot left in here. If we get crazy later on,
that's right,
we could work on the bottom end and actually get some more power. You could probably take this thing up to 1,000 horse.
Oh, absolutely. That's what's nice about getting the efficiency out of the blower. For a smaller package, I can move a lot of air and, maybe a pulley upgrade and throttle body size. This guy's ready to feed a lot more. But they want to take care of the engine, so we're doing about 8.5 pounds of boost. We've got a good calibration to put on it so that the stock engine is really going to last. You really want to go do some beef ups before you start hitting that 1,000 horsepower. Yeah.